Good evening, everybody. 7 o'clock. Let's make a start. So, agenda item 1, Chair's announcements. Before this meeting starts, I have a few announcements to make. The emergency evacuation procedures. In the case of a fire, a bell will ring continuously. If this occurs, please leave the building immediately following the green fire exit signs out to the assembly point, which is by the War Memorial on Duke Street. If anyone requires any assistance, please do let me know. Lifts should not be used. Please remain at the assembly point and do not attempt to return into the building until you have been advised that it is safe to do so. With regards to facilities, the toilets are situated on the landing at the top of the main staircase and on the ground floor in the customer service centre. Mobile phones, please make sure they are switched off for the duration of this meeting. Thank you. Filming of the meeting. Anyone attending this meeting is entitled to film it, but I should point out that only the councillors, officers and anyone sitting around these tables may be filmed. Members of the public should not be filmed, so please ensure that cameras are pointed only in this direction. Note this meeting is also being broadcast live via YouTube and being recorded. When speaking, please may I remind the committees to ensure that you have turned your microphone on and to speak closely into it. A red light will appear on the middle button to indicate that your microphone is switched on. When finished speaking, please remember to turn your microphone off again. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillors Dobson, Papa and Tron, and Councillor Raven is subbing for Councillor Dobson.
Thank you. Agenda item 3. Sorry, Councillor Lodge.
Just to note that Councillor Sampson sent a message saying that she is trying to park and will be arriving as soon as she can. Okay, let's see if she makes it for the first one. If not, she'll take part in the second decisions that we make. Thank you. Agenda item, back to 3. Declarations of interest. All members are reminded that they must disclose any interests they know they have in terms of business on the meeting's agenda, and that they must do so at this point on the agenda or as soon as they become aware of the interest. If the interest is a disclosable pecuniary interest, then they are also obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of this meeting. Does anyone have anything to declare? No? Thank you. Agenda item 4, the minutes. We had the meetings on the 9th and 15th of December. I would like to say at this point thank you to Democratic Services for condensing a 4-hour meeting into just 6 pages. So that is appreciated. Are we all in agreement those are correct record? Thank you. Public question time, agenda item 5. Any member of the public may ask a question or make a statement at this point in the meeting, providing that they have submitted their question or statement in writing in advance. Each person has 2 minutes and a maximum of 20 minutes is allocated to public questions or statements, which must be about the matters for which the committee is responsible. The chair may disallow a question if it is offensive, substantially the same as another question, or require disclosure of exempt or confidential information. If the question cannot be answered at the meeting, a written response will be provided after the meeting. When an application is returning to the committee that has been deferred for a site visit for further information or to consider detailed reasons for refusal, no further public questions or statements may be submitted. Any member of the public who wishes to submit a question or statement to this meeting should email it to committees@chelmsford.gov.uk 24 hours before the start time of the meeting. All valid questions and statements will be published with the agenda on the website at least 6 hours before the start time and will be responded to at the meeting. Those who have submitted a valid question or statement will be entitled to put this in person in the meeting. Note that we have several different applications on the agenda this evening, and we'll invite you to speak when your application comes forward. Agenda item 6, 25/01025/Full, land north of Highwood Road, roundabout Riddle, Chelmsford, Essex. Can I ask the officer to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is within Riddle Parish and it is at the western end of the village, shown there with the red circle. The site is on the west side of Bullimers Way, and the proposed application is for a Gypsy and Traveller pitch, and that would be located in the area outlined in red. The remainder of the land in the ownership is outlined in blue. There are three access points indicated with that red line. One is the existing access, the southernmost one. The middle one is the proposed, and there is an old disused access, which is the northernmost one. So just to have a look at the context here, the red line there, the approximate rectangle, you can see there that clips into the corner of a small area of woodland. The wider field parcel is enclosed with native boundary hedges. And the red line application site measures approximately 27 metres by 47 metres, as I say, approximately. The area of woodland indicated in pink is a protected woodland. It's a lowland mix of deciduous woodland. And there's a bit more context. We've got a footpath that links back into the Writtle village with the yellow dashed lines. And on the other side of the road, on the 414, we've got the Hanging Garden Nurseries Garden Centre, again, just to give you a bit of context. And you can see the proximity of the site to the residential development of Writtle village. So it's all quite close. So from your agenda papers, you'll be aware what the proposal is for. We have a plan here indicating a suggested layout with a static caravan and one touring caravan. We have an area of permeable hard surfacing. The existing access would be closed and a new access created a little further north. A very small area of woodland in that top corner would be removed, and we can see there indicated replacement tree planting. And the images you will have seen before from a previous presentation in early December when the committee considered an application for a traveller site in Sandon. But you'll be familiar with the type of caravans we will be expecting on a site like this. So what does this site look like at the moment? And I've got a few photographs here from different viewpoints showing both summer and winter, because it's a deciduous boundary treatment. So obviously in the winter, no leaves on the hedges, so more visible to see through. So this is literally peering over the entrance gate, and you'll see there it's a field with not much going on. I believe it has been used more recently for horses, but not much activity in any shape or form, just pasture and overgrown paddock area. This is where the entrance, so you can see the existing entrance with the field gate, and we've got a new entrance going in there. Again, winter and summer, you can see the difference between the screening in winter and summer. And just a few more viewpoints here from the main road. Looking northwards from the roundabout, again, summer and winter. You can see the difference between the screening provided. And then coming from a different direction, coming from the Harlow direction. Again, we've got that boundary hedge, summer and winter. And then coming from the Highlands Park end, across the view over the roundabout, again, we've got the summer and winter view. So, the starting point, the development plan. So members will be aware that the Chelmsford local plan does allocate land for gypsy and traveller sites, but that does not prevent further windfall applications coming forward such as this. The most relevant planning policy in our local plan is policy DM3. You will be familiar with that. And also there's the Writtle neighbourhood plan, which is part of the development plan. In orange there, we've got the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, and the National Planning Policy for Traveller Sites. They are material planning considerations. Both of those date from December 2024, and they are important documents in the consideration of this application. So, I'm going to start with need, which is something members are familiar with from the previous committee meeting. But it is a very important consideration with this application. Whichever way you want to look at it, Chelmsford has a shortfall of gypsy and traveller pitches. National policy is published within the planning policy for traveller sites, and it says at paragraph 9 that local planning authorities should set pitch targets for travellers as defined in Annex 1, which addresses the likely permanent and transit site accommodation needs of travellers in that area. You'll also be aware, again from previous presentations and from the report, that following a High Court decision, how a traveller is counted, altered, which upped the number of pitches that all councils nationally have to provide for. So that slide is explaining in purple and white that we have a shortfall of traveller sites as of this moment in time. And windfall sites such as this are expected to be a reliable source of supply for us during the plan period. So that's need. And clearly we cannot show a 5-year supply of deliverable sites at the present time. So hold that thought. So what does that unmet need mean for us in determining this planning application? So again, we come back to the starting position, which is the development plan. It's always the development plan. And planning decisions should be made in accordance with that plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. But our local plan, as you know, is more than 5 years old. It's out of date. It's reduced weight. We also don't have a 5-year housing supply. We also are not meeting our accommodation needs for gypsy and travellers. The PPTS, the planning policy for traveller sites, says if you can't demonstrate an up-to-date 5-year supply of deliverable sites for gypsy and travellers, paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework applies. And I don't need to remind members what that means in terms of the tilted balance, in terms of decision making for housing, gypsy and traveller sites, travelling showman sites. The balance is tilted towards granting planning permission. So we have an out-of-date development plan. It's out of date in regard to housing delivery, in this case gypsy and traveller sites. The MPPF paragraph 11D applies to our decision making. Tilted balance, we're in that arena. So I'm just leaving that point there for the moment. Greenbelt. So the site is located within the Metropolitan Greenbelt, and this slide shows where the defined settlement boundary of Writtle is located, and the green washover is the Greenbelt. Our policy DM3 is a criteria-based policy, and the first criteria of policy DM3 says gypsy and traveller sites should not be located within the Greenbelt unless there are very special circumstances. So our policy DM3, which is our starting point, is pushing back, saying no to Greenbelt development, but the local plan is out of date, and the local plan also predates the latest MPPF, which was published in 2024. And that's really important because in December 2024, the MPPF introduced grey belt. So with any planning application we have in the green belt, we have to look at the grey belt assessment to see whether or not the development is inappropriate development or not. So the grey belt assessment has been gone through in some detail in the officer report, but it's paragraph 155 of the MPPF that is relevant here. And the relevant parts of paragraph 155 are parts A, B and C. Part D is not relevant because that relates to major development, which this is not. So the first criteria of paragraph 155 is that we have to make a decision on whether this is grey belt land. Grey belt is defined in the annexes of the PPF. And the committee report at paragraph 6.16 to 6.24 go through that grey belt assessment, and it concludes that the site is on grey belt land. The second element of 155 requires a consideration of the wider purposes of the green belt in the plan area, so the whole of Chelmsford. So this is a small site in the whole of Chelmsford's green belt allocation, and the development here proposed would not fundamentally undermine the green belt purposes, which are A, to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, B, to prevent neighbouring towns from merging, and C, to preserve settings of historic towns. So paragraph 155A of the MPPF is complied with. We then have to go on to paragraph 155B, and that requires there to be a demonstrable unmet need for whatever the development is that's being proposed. And we know from the earlier slide that Chelmsford cannot demonstrate that it meets its need for gypsy and traveller sites. So under paragraph 155B, there is a demonstrated need. So that paragraph is met. The final relevant paragraph of paragraph 155C is that the development needs to be in a sustainable location. The report sets out the proximity of the site to facilities such as schools, community uses. You saw the slide area earlier that showed the close proximity of the site to the main Writtle village. The current application includes sufficient traffic data to satisfy us that there is no highway safety concerns in terms of crossing the road. So officers are content that this is a sustainable location. So what that means, going round in a circle, is that the proposed development meets the relevant criteria of paragraph 155. And although the site is located within the green belt, the proposed development in meeting paragraph 155 means that it's not inappropriate development in the green belt. And because it's not inappropriate development in the green belt, we don't need to consider the impact of the development on openness and do not need to consider very special circumstances. So although our adopted local plan policy DM3 in its first criteria looks to prevent gypsy and traveller development in the green belt unless very special circumstances, paragraph 155 of the MPPF postdates that policy. It is more up to date, it is more relevant. And because the local plan is out of date, we are in that situation where more weight is given to the MPPF policies than local plan policies in this case. As we're in tilted balance, MPPF paragraph 11D sets out where policies in the framework can provide strong reasons for withholding consent. And the only relevant reason in this case is the site's in the green belt. But the site here is in the green belt, but it's also grey belt, So there are no strong reasons for withholding planning permission on green belt terms because this is grey belt, it meets the criteria of paragraph 155 and it's not inappropriate development. I appreciate that's quite a lot to take in. So just to recap, we know we have a need for gypsy and traveller sites in the district. It's grey belt, so it's not inappropriate development. Therefore, the MPPF says we should grant planning permission unless there are strong reasons for refusing the development or any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And I've highlighted those words particularly to make sure members are clear that the bar is high here in terms of resisting development. So I just want to look at some of the other relevant matters that we need to take into account, and one of them is character and appearance, our own policy DM10. And we looked at some earlier images of different viewpoints of the site, both in summer and winter. And clearly there's nothing on the field at the moment. And if the development were permitted, we would, in the winter in particular, be able to see through that hedge as shown on the screen, and you would see the caravan, you would see any cars, you would see activity. So it would be visible. Officers conclude that the development would cause some harm to the existing character and appearance, but officers' conclusion is that harm would be moderate. We also looked carefully at highway safety and the new access arrangements. The blue arrow and the blue shading is the existing access from the roundabout, and the pink arrow and the pink shading is the new access. It moves a little, but not too far, but that's enough in highway safety terms, together with the traffic speed data that was submitted as part of the application in both directions, to satisfy the highway authority that the proposed new access is safe. There's sufficient parking and turning area within the site for all vehicles, including a fire tender, should it ever need to visit the site. So there's no highway objection to the proposal, and as there's no highway safety matter, that significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of a pitch provision here to meet our need. Flood risk. The site is in Zone 1, which is the lowest level of flood risk. The application is accompanied by a flood risk assessment. There's no risk here of river or tidal flooding. The blue honeycomb shaded area is the permeable hard surfacing that the planning application proposes. So looking at that in a bit more detail, and apologies for the quality of the image on the right, it's quite blurry. It's from the Environment Agency mapping system. What that shows in dark blue and light blue, the light blue areas are the areas of lowest risk of surface water flooding, which is at a 0.1% risk, and it only affects the very peripheral edges of the new access area. So risk of flooding is really low at this site, and any risk is proposed to be managed through the site design, which is a permeable surfacing to allow surface water, when it rains a lot, just to drain through. The proposal uses the correct hierarchy in terms of you try and do infiltration first before you start introducing pipes to take water off-site or into water courses. There is no flood risk matter here that significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of pitch provision to meet our need. I've grouped these together. They are all set out in the report in detail. In terms of trees, one tree would be removed to allow for the new access position to go in, and that tree does sit in that small area of protected woodland. Replacement trees, as you can see, close to the access and then further back into a field, that's proposed. Where the existing access is located, that would be closed and a new hedging popped across. So again, whilst a tree would be removed and there would be some replacement hedging on a very small section, there isn't any arboricultural matter that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of pitch provision. The report also discusses amenity and heritage and ecology, and all those matters have been addressed by various reports and assessments. So, for completeness, circling back to the beginning, which is our policy DM3, which is our starting point because that is still our adopted planning policy. We've gone through why the first criteria is out of date. The new MPPF supersedes DM3 because we're now dealing with grey belt, not just green belt. And all other criteria in that policy are satisfied. So, if I come to the conclusion, and the conclusion is having regard to the MPPF, the grey belt consideration, the compliance with our local plan, and also national guidance on gypsy and traveller sites. And planning balance, you'll be familiar with that slide and how we put the pros and cons on either side of it. In favour of the development, we're in tilted balance. We have to have a strong reason for refusing. We don't have a strong reason for refusing, I would suggest. it's in the green belt, but it's grey belt, and it meets the tests for not being inappropriate development. The principle is therefore accepted, and the development for one pitch would meet some of our demonstrated need. On the other side of the planning balance, there would be an impact on character and appearance, particularly so this time of year. I think in the summer months, when the hedge is in full bloom, the development will be quite well screened. It is acknowledged that hedge management takes place over time. You will cut it back and face it back as necessary, so the impact will go up and down. But the moderate harm to the character and appearance of the area sits on the other side of the planning balance. So officers' conclusion is that the harm from the character and appearance is not sufficient. It does not meet the tests for being a strong reason for withholding planning permission, or significantly and demonstrably outweighing all those positives that are on the other side of the planning scales. So officers' recommendation is for approval, subject to planning conditions as outlined in the officer report.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, two things. There was a green sheet for this meeting, and there was a minor thing on this with a change to one of the conditions. And Councillor Sampson, you missed literally a couple of lines at the beginning, so I'm happy for you to take part in the decision making for this one. We have a couple of members of the public that I understand would like to speak at this point. I'll go alphabetically. Mr. Brown John. Thank you. You have 2 minutes and I'll be quite strict. Thank you.
Good evening. I would like to start by thanking the Chair and fellow members for allowing me to speak on behalf of the applicant. The application seeks consent for the proposed material change of use of land to create a single gypsy traveller pitch. Specific to this case, the applicant relies on policy compliance rather than personal circumstance. The key change since previous refusals is the greenbelt position, and that previous conclusions that the development would amount to inappropriate development have had to change due to the introduction of greybelt within the new MPPF. The site itself has been found to not strongly contribute to purposes A, B or D of the greenbelt. There is also the lack of a 5-year supply, and officers have concluded that the site is sustainably located. Accordingly, the required tests of MPPF 155 are passed. Other issues that were considered previously, such as the safety of the access, impacts to protected species and trees, have all been addressed through further comprehensive reporting work and a redesign of the scheme itself, whilst it remains the case that a single pitch is all that permission is sought for. Officers and statutory consultees have considered the proposals in detail and concluded that those matters outlined are adequately addressed, and anything else can be dealt with by condition. And in short, the council's advisors do not wish to restrict the grant of planning permission. In terms of character and appearance, visibility in winter months does not equate to unacceptable harm. Indeed, the PPTS makes clear that traveller sites should not be designed to give the impression that they are deliberately isolated. Even then, the applicant does concur with the conclusions of the officer that the adverse impacts are not significant in scale. Overall, the applicant supports the conclusions that the development proposed represents a policy DM3 compliance scheme which would provide a windfall site to meet the current unmet need. Whilst it is the case that the plan-led approach has failed the travelling community is consequential to the change in definition, but nevertheless, as the council cannot demonstrate an appropriate supply of gypsy and traveller sites against the 2024 definition, the tilted balance is engaged. As such, the applicant invites members to support the conclusions of the planning officer in this case and grant planning permission for a single pitch that would contribute towards addressing the identified shortfall in sites within this area on a site where the harms are admittedly very limited and therefore where the benefits would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the identified conflict with the local plan. Thank you.
That was quite impressive speed reading there, thank you. Mr. Cloak or Clock, I apologise for not getting that correct. Yeah, thank you.
Chair and councillors, good evening. I live close to the site and have also been asked to speak on behalf of neighbours. Whilst I note the reasons for the recommendation, this is still inappropriate development. Many of the key reasons for refusal in previous applications remain. The site is apparently now greybelt, but the government's rationale for greybelt land is to provide substantial public benefits, none of which are apparent here. Even if it is accepted the tilted balance applies, it is perfectly acceptable for councillors to insist those previous reasons for refusal are mitigated as far as possible. The report concludes the development will result in residual harm to the character and appearance of the area. There are three key aspects which could be amended to offset this. Firstly, there will be a 1/4 of an acre of hard standing along the frontage of the site at this key gateway into Writtle. This is by any measure significantly in excess of the area reasonably needed to accommodate a mobile home, caravan and 2 car parking spaces. The plan submitted shows substantial areas with no specified use, but it is inconceivable this will be unused, giving rise to a substantial risk of intrusive visual clutter. If we must permit the concreting of the green belt, councillors should be satisfied it is the absolute minimum necessary, and here it could quite easily be much reduced without impacting on the proposed use. The applicant has not justified the amount of hard standing, and this infrastructure will also make future applications to intensify the use of the site much more difficult to resist. Secondly, Condition 6 must be tightened to control all forms of open storage to prevent future argument about whether it is for commercial or domestic use. Thirdly, the well-established existing hedges around the site have recently been cut back, giving rise to very permeable views into the site. A condition is required to ensure they are not removed or reduced further. As the proposed new planting is stated as an important benefit of the application, it would also be reasonable for councillors to require details now rather than leaving it to a condition. In summary, councillors should refuse this application on the basis the level of hard standing is excessive and the draft conditions are not yet sufficient to mitigate the harm. At the very least, a decision should be deferred to allow further consideration of those points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we come on to Councillor Knight, I would like officers to come back on anything raised there at all.
Of course, Chair. The local residents have concluded that this is still inappropriate development. Officers' view, having carefully considered all the relevant factors of paragraph 155, the proposal meets all the relevant tests, and in meeting all the relevant tests of paragraph 155, it's appropriate development in the green belt. I know that's quite a difficult concept for some of us to deal with as planning officers. There's been quite a shift in our way of having to deal with planning applications in the green belt in recent months, but we have carefully considered all the rules around grey belt and paragraph 155 and conclude that this development meets the relevant tests, so it's appropriate development in the green belt. In terms of the area of hard surfacing, and I listened to the residents' concerns that it's a large area, we can only deal with the planning application in front of us. It's an area that will be supplemented by condition by additional landscaping within the site to provide further screening. In terms of the concern about outside storage and outside domestic storage, Condition 6 looks to prevent commercial use and commercial activities and storage. This is a domestic plot, for want of a better word. How reasonable is it to stop someone storing, garden chairs and benches on their piece of land in the same way that a bricks and mortar dweller might do? I think officers are content with the conditions that are proposed. There has been some recent facing back of the hedge along Bullimers Way. I went out and had a look at that, and it's very much to do with making sure that the visibility displays that the Highway Authority were looking for have been implemented. And if members wish to, I've got a photograph showing that work that's been done, but the hedge is still very much there and in situ, just taken off the verge. In terms of the previous planning application, my piece of paper over there was a previous planning application approximately 6 months ago for a similar development which was refused, and members will have noted that in their agenda pack, and it was refused for a number of reasons. All of those reasons related to technical matters, absence of adequate traffic data to satisfy us that the highway access was safe, inadequate information with trees, inadequate information on ecology, inadequate information on flooding. So in terms of, it looks like a robust refusal, but when it's technical matters which have now all been addressed with the correct information that satisfy us on all matters, That's why we're now in a position to be able to grant planning permission. The site previously, 6 months ago, was in the grey belt, but one of the tests for satisfying paragraph 155 is the site has to be in a sustainable location. And because we didn't have the traffic information that satisfied us that the access was safe, it meant that we couldn't say it was a sustainable location. It didn't mean that it wasn't grey belt, it just didn't satisfy all the requirements of paragraph 155.
Thank you. Councillor Knight, I invite you to speak now. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. This seems like, to me anyway, an opportunistic approach by the applicant to take advantage of a temporary situation that the council finds itself in because it can't demonstrate that it has enough pitches for gypsies and travellers. Now, it can't sustain that position. It will have to correct it, and being a good council, having in the first place put a perfectly reasonable Chelmsford development plan in place, I'm sure it will correct that very, very quickly. Just round the corner from the present site is Lady Grove, for example, which is a gypsy and traveller site. And I make this point because I will come back to it later. You can't actually walk from this proposed site to Lady Grove because you'll take your health into your hands. The amount of traffic going along there's no pavement whatsoever. It's a most inhospitable site for pedestrians. So one of the points that came up is that it has to be sustainable. You could walk from there into the village, and, people would do it. But immediately coming out of the access or egress gate, you're into trying to dodge the traffic and getting onto somewhere before you get to somewhere that's safe to actually get into the village. So taking children to school, for example, or carrying your shopping back from the co-op in the middle of town, middle of the village, you can just forget it. Absolutely hopeless. So why is the council in this position? Well, it hasn't been brought up, but I think you do know that the government changed the criteria. It put a perfectly reasonable development plan in place to build 950 houses per year over a 15-year period, and then suddenly upped it to 1,548 or thereabouts, and didn't give the council any time whatsoever to adjust to that. So that's the reason it's in that position, and it's how Whitehall can expect councils like this good councils like this, to overcome those barriers, I've no idea. But it will overcome them, and it will overcome them very, very soon. So it's opportunistic in the sense that it's been refused twice before. And okay, there's a few tweaks. They're going to tweak something here, put something there, don't do something over there. But the same criteria still applies. It's in a green belt area, and there is an impact to it. There can't be otherwise. There's harm to, and it actually said it up there, there's harm to the appearance and the character. And if you know anything about Writtle, and I'm sure you do, Writtle is all about appearance and character. And I'm sure, as you know, as you drive around Essex, there are quite a few, dozens of them probably, of villages like Writtle that are being destroyed by big developments, small developments, inappropriate developments, and the character goes, the appearance and character goes as a result of it. There's an adverse impact on wildlife. Well, I think they've probably overcome that. But there's recreational disturbance. But the highway safety, another point that's not been brought up, and I can't understand why. On the plan, you will see an access and egress for the proposed development. Directly opposite is an access and egress that was put in place 30-odd years ago for access off that Bullimers Way onto Lodge Road, which takes you directly into the middle of Writtle. And it was closed. You no longer have access on that road. And it was closed. It was closed because it's a dangerous access and egress onto a dangerous, very busy road. Very, very busy. I think the A414, which is the main road going east-west, There was I think Essex County, I read in the paper, the Essex County Council are going to redesign it. They're going to put 40-mile-an-hour limits and so on and so on and so on. But that means it's a very, very busy road. It's the main road to the M11. So by definition, it's going to be busy. So, and of course, travellers' pitches, important as they are, they're going to come up at Warren Farm, which is about a mile away as the crow flies, and that's going to be developed anytime soon. So what I'm saying to you is, it's been rejected twice before, the same reasons still apply, and I hope you can reject it again.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. I'll invite officers to come back on anything said there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Knight makes reference to advantage being taken of a temporary situation the council finds itself in. It's a matter of fact that the council doesn't have either a 5-year land supply or a 5-year supply of gypsy and traveller sites. That's pretty not uncommon nationally at the moment for lots of reasons, particularly the economy. We can only make recommendations to you on the basis of what the situation is at the moment. And at the moment, we are in tilted balance. You know that. You've had training on that. The Lady Grove site, which is on the other side of the 414, I don't disagree with Councillor Knight. You probably wouldn't want to walk between the sites, but that's not what the sustainability argument is about, walking between traveller sites. The sustainability of this site is about how you can use and access the facilities within the village, the school, the shops, the community hall, not whether you might have some friends or relatives who may or may not live in a nearby traveller site. It is in the green belt, and I hope I explained that grey belt introduced December 2024 is more relevant and more up to date than our local plan, so we have to give more weight to the MPPF as a material planning consideration, and it meets all the tests that it needs to meet to be not inappropriate development in the green belt. The Lodge Road access. I've visited the site a couple of times. I'm not a Whittle resident. I know some members of the committee are. The times I've visited the site, cross the road easily. The visibility is really clear. The Highway Authority, with the data that has been provided from speed survey work in both directions, are wholly satisfied that it's a safe access for both vehicles and pedestrians. And that allows you to cross the road from the site to directly onto the footpath that takes you onto Lodge Road to get into the village easily and quickly. There is no highway safety reason to refuse this application. And the Warren Farm scheme, which is on the other side of Whittle, that, as part of its allocation, is providing a number, I think it's 5, top of my head, 5 pitches for travelling showmen. So it's including its share of specialist housing within its overall housing allocation, but that doesn't include any specific gypsy and traveller sites because it's got the showman allocation.
Thank you. Could you clarify with the revised local plan that's in progress at the moment, if that has enough pitches and how much weight we should be giving that?
I'm happy to take that one, Chair. The local plan review allocates 30 gypsy and traveller pitches, and need across the plan period is 44 pitches. So we are reliant on windfall sites such as this coming forward. We will not meet our need solely through the local plan review.
Thank you, that does clarify it. At this point, I would like to open it up to the committee for any questions. Councillor Thorpe-Apps.
Thank you, Chair. It's described in the report that officers have refused previous near-identical applications for this site, and Councillor Knight references as well, because those applications conflicted in various ways with the local plan and Rittle's neighbourhood plan. Having read tonight's report, those policy conflicts appear to remain, and objectively there are many weaknesses in the application if we compare it to the development plan. I do have sympathy with officers who this time around have had to change tack because, as we've heard, the council can't demonstrate the 5-year supply of deliverable sites, and so the tilted balance is in play, which, as we know, can allow for green belt development. Doesn't have to, but can. If that were not an issue, I think it seems likely that officers would have refused on normal planning grounds. The tilted balance requires a sustainable site, and I do have questions about the description of this site as being sustainable. As I understand it, in planning terms, distance doesn't necessarily equal sustainability. The MPPF sustainability test is whether there is safe and suitable access for users, genuine opportunities for walking, cycling, and reduced reliance on cars. As I understand it, this principle was set out in the 2024 MPPF update, moving away from sustainability solely focused on proximity to a more nuanced approach. The report, as I read it, is quite lukewarm on the site's sustainability. If you look at section 6.29, it notes that the proposal only carries some sustainability credentials. So my first question is, if sustainability credentials are weak, is this sufficient to support the tilted balance? What are the minimum requirements in terms of sustainability? And secondly, how does this location, which is outside the defined settlement and which requires pedestrians and cyclists to cross a national speed limit road with restricted visibility display, support the site being sustainable? I wondered if the officers could come back to me on those two and if I could possibly follow up. Thank you.
I'll pass over to the officers. Thank you, Councillor Dobbs.
So in terms of sustainability, the site is indicated with the blue star. I've indicated the school, I've indicated the closest community facility. You can cross directly into, it's a bit of Highwood Road actually, which pops out immediately opposite the application site. And then you follow the road with a footpath to Whittle School, which is about 900 metres away. In terms of being in a sustainable location, I find it difficult to say that isn't in a sustainable location. If that site is closer than houses on Ongar Road to village facilities, we've had the Highway Authority assess the traffic speed data. They insisted that the data was in both directions. So the applicant had to go away and get more information, and the road is safe to cross. Once you come off that roundabout on the 414 and turn into the yellow road there, visibility is pretty good. You can see very clearly any vehicles coming. So the Highway Authority are content that it is a safe access point for all users. In terms of the MPPF, you have to keep going backwards and forwards between paragraphs. Yeah. It's you lose yourself sometimes in it. So we have to look at paragraphs 110 and paragraphs 115 because 155 tells us so. And I mean, they're high level paragraphs in terms of what you should be looking for a sustainable location. They talk about managed patterns of growth and reduced congestion and emissions. I mean, this is a single site for one family. I don't think we're in that ballpark area. It does talk about in 115 that it's a safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved for all users. And we are content that this is a safe and suitable access to the site. And the test for highway safety is a high bar as well. We've spoken about this before. It's a case of there has to be significant impacts on the highway for there to be grounds for refusal. So we're simply not in that ballpark in terms of this single development for one family to live on the site. So officers are content that this is a sustainable location for one family to live.
Thank you. There's another query about the defined settlement. Is that, yeah.
Can you show? Which one is it? It's the green belt one. It's in the earlier presentation. That one. So, as you would expect, the defined settlement boundary, as is, wraps itself quite tightly around the existing housing development at Writtle. So the highway verges just outside the village envelope are in the green belt. So it is literally, 50 yards away from the defined settlement boundary.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, perhaps, do you want to come back on anything there?
Please, yes. Thank you for those responses. So looking at the site, it looks pretty clear that the development would be reliant on car use. And I wondered how that aligns with sustainability and active travel objectives and policies which are set out both in the local plan and Writtle's neighbourhood plan. The report says that we need to give equal weight to the local plan and the Writtle neighbourhood plan. And active travel is a key element in the neighbourhood plan. What weight can this committee therefore give to these policy conflicts in relation to active and sustainable travel? And finally, could you comment on the so-called barrier effect, which I understand is a planning term, in relation to movement when we look at the roundabout, because the access point is very near to the roundabout, and how this barrier effect may weaken sustainability further? Thank you.
So for Gypsy and Traveller sites, our own policy talks about the services and facilities that the residents would use being within a reasonable travelling distance. Normally we're faced with traveller pitches that are quite some way out of communities. They tend to be in far-flung rural locations. I would say this one is quite unusual in that it is very close to the village. I'll come back to the point again, it's safe to cross the road. The Highway Authority tells us so. It's walking distance to the school. How do we know that this site or occupiers on here would be wholly reliant on the car? If they have children, why wouldn't they walk them to the village school, as most parents would likely do, and avoid the congestion around the school gate that everyone wants to avoid? So in terms of the barrier effect of the roundabout, I'm not too sure where you're coming from there. I apologise, Councillor. Again, I can only repeat that the access is in a safe location and the Highway Authority are perfectly content with it, even though it has a close proximity to that roundabout. The visibility is excellent. I stood there myself at the weekend and pretended to drive an invisible car out of the access. It is... You can see completely everything you need to see as a driver and a pedestrian.
Thank you. Councillor Large.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question, which I think it's dealt with in here, but the fire service brought up a query about the hard standing. They didn't think it was sufficient or sufficient quality, which I think is dealt with in condition 13. And I just wanted to check that there's this line here to allow access of fire tender, that is in response to their query.
Yes, Councillor Lodge, that's purposefully worded to pick up that point. In all honesty, the mobile homes themselves are within the 48 metres distance anyway for fire tenders, so in reality a fire tender probably wouldn't need to go onto the site, but that condition deals with that point that you're making.
Councillor Armstrong.
Obviously, it's disappointing that we're in a position where we're not plan-led, it's been said, and it seems the new plan isn't going to help in that situation either, so it is a matter of tilt-to-balance. Cynical as I am, I think the fact that we've talked about tilt-to-balance so much this evening is, personally, in my opinion, because this wouldn't be approved without the consideration of tilt-to-balance. As my personal opinion, and tilt-to-balance is going to purely then rely on whether this is green belt or grey belt, because green belt is a piece of protection that still protects us against tilt-to-balance, because it is sort of written in unless there is a serious dedicated need and there's seriously no measure of demonstrating the harm. My thought was, would it be possible to go back to the slide with the school in? Just because that was quite a good broader image of it. My slight concern is the importance of the green belt in this location actually is partly that as you're leaving Chelmsford or entering Chelmsford, you can progress a long way along the A414 with clear green views going either way with very little interruption of development or buildings, and therefore the communities are kept separate and not merging together. That's part of what's described in the green belt. My concern is in placing a development in this location, it sort of spreads the defined settlement boundary, the urban sprawl which the green belt is supposed to be protecting against, from Whittle to the A414 and then allows it to cross the A414. It also means as you're driving along, it will be stop-start of seeing visual developments and a breaking up of the very important, I think, to Rittle's character and idea of a place, that it isn't Chelmsford, it's a separate village community, and it's separated from the 414 and from Chelmsford. I appreciate only by a matter of a field, and it's possibly ever sort of reducing, but this is the one place where I actually think I almost want to see the planning inspectorate's final view on whether this is grey belt or not, because my definition of this site is because it hasn't been previously developed, and I don't think it can be classed as grey belt because of its importance of its views and sort of sense of openness around that roundabout, that because when the hedges are up and the field's green behind, you cannot see the development of Whittle, and you could literally be anywhere in the country. And I think that's important to our intrinsic character and nature.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to come back on at this point, or we're arguing the grey or green, aren't we, effectively?
It's, I don't know how else to say it. It meets all the tests of being in the grey belt. The government's guidance on how you assess it looks to prevent towns from merging and joining, and there was some early pieces of appeal decisions on whether a village was a town or a town was a village. So the government actually introduced more guidance to make it very clear that the grey belt assessment related to towns merging together, not villages. So we don't have, village, Whittle is a village, and it's not merging with anything in this direction. So I understand your frustration, Councillor Armstrong, but we are clear that this meets the tests of paragraph 155 in the MPPF.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on at that point, if you look at page 25 of the agenda pack, 6.20 talks about the grey belt land, and the question I have is, where has this land been previously developed? Because it says there, the MPF says, land in the green belt comprising previously developed land. What previous development happened on this land that then makes it grey belt? I'm seeing it as green, not grey belt.
Sorry, where was that?
Page 25 of the agenda pack, 6.20.
6.20, thank you.
And it says land in the Greenbelt, compromising of previously developed land.
Yep, I've got it, thank you. Yeah, that's right.
Councillor Hyland, the MPPF talks about it being PDL and or other land. So it doesn't have to be PDL, and or means basically any other land, whether it's had something on it or not. And this piece of land falls into that and or any other land.
So it may as well just say any land then, really. It's a bit odd. No, I fully appreciate you don't write the rules. It's a case of interpreting them, which is what officers are for and what the committee's for. But yeah, that's not the bestly worded NPPF. Councillor Armstrong.
That's why, partly in the balance, if a green field doesn't... It would require the planning inspector to prove that it fits in the and then go to paragraphs A, B and D in 143 to then actually demonstrate that this green land doesn't hold value. Now, in my opinion, it's valuable to whittle separation from the 414 and the sense of the rural area, because this isn't the rural area, not adjacent to a defined settlement boundary or defined settlement boundary. And I would be interested to see whether this piece of green land would hold up. Obviously, the green wedge elsewhere in Chelmsford has in cases. So I personally think it would be interesting to see on that technicality, which is what I think this case slightly holds on, is it green or is it grey? And I really want to know on a higher level, because I look at it and think it's green.
Shall I come back on that?
It's not a technicality. It's an assessment of paragraph 155 of the MPPF. So it's the same way that we would assess, is it replacement dwelling, is it PDL. It's a new paragraph that was inserted into the December 2024 MPPF that introduced another way that development wouldn't be inappropriate, because the list of development before that was it was a closed list of all development types that could be carried out in the Greenbelt, and it was a very short list of what you could do in the Greenbelt and what you couldn't do, and everyone was clear what they were probably doing. Paragraph 155 opened the door to all sorts of development as long as it met those criteria in 155 to say that it's acceptable in the Greenbelt in principle. It's not inappropriate development, and that could be a development for one traveller site. It could be a development for 500 houses. It would still go through the same assessment under paragraph 155. And daily we have appeal decisions nationally that we look at and come our way. That probably the most appealed decision that's coming out of PINS at the moment is refusals against development where it's in the grey belt, and councils have found it very difficult to run with that argument. But we're very content that this is 155 compliant and it's not inappropriate development in the green belt. I appreciate that's a very difficult thing for all of us to get our heads around when we've been so used to, for many years, being quite confident saying, no, you can't have that, that's in the green belt, because that's how we've been working for a very, very long time. But that changed with the MPPF in December 2024.
Councillor Hall.
So the area concerns me as well. And take all the points on board, but what happens now if you approve this and you set a precedent effectively for that area? How do you decide and demarcate or stop other assessments of grey areas, and then subsequent? This doesn't apply, by the way, just to travellers' camps. This applies to any
any buildings. But going back to the intrinsic character of Writtle and the beauty and everything else, how do you stop that once you've approved it? How do you stop that encroachment?
Obviously, every case is considered on its merits, so it depends on many factors. And paragraph 155, as we talked about, it's not just about is it in the green belt. There has to be a need for the type of development you're dealing with, and it has to be sustainable. And each type of development will have different requirements for what's sustainable. So it's not necessarily a floodgate is opening. I think the difficulty for many councils at the moment with Greenbelt is, and especially, and Chelmsford's in this situation at the moment, if it's housing, if it's traveller sites, we have a need. And that's one of the tests in 155. If you've got a 5-year land supply for both housing or gypsy and traveller sites, then you won't pass go on paragraph 155. But we're not in that position at the moment until our local plan starts moving ahead with all of the new sites that have been allocated.
Thank you. Councillor Larch.
Thank you. I kind of view this application as being, I think, like you've just said, something that we're not used to seeing come through, and something that we feel a bit uncomfortable with, maybe. But equally, when you look at the 155 criteria, I think that this site does meet those things. And if I know some people are arguing that we should refuse effectively, but I haven't heard people saying on those criteria which one doesn't it meet, because if that's the test, then we have to be able to say, well, actually, one of these paragraphs doesn't fit. So I think that would have to be said. I did have a slight question, which I think the answer is probably no. But on the hedging, because it does look different summer and winter, is it possible to have a different type of hedging that would mean it was screened all year round?
Over to the officers.
One of the planning conditions, I can't remember which number, is asking for landscaping detailing. That would sit within the existing hedgerow. We would ordinarily look for a mix of native. We can look for that to be interspersed with some evergreen. I wouldn't like to see miles of evergreen running around the boundaries, but the landscaping will significantly bolster what's already there.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Frascona.
While I appreciate that we obviously have to consider the application in front of us, it does seem to me that the concreting or doing hard standing for 1/4 of an acre is excessive, and it doesn't seem necessary for the development. I mean, so it could be possible to refuse this. I took the point of the resident that really once you've created hard standing to that extent, it's not going to go back. It's going to stay. It's going to be, if anything, more developed. It's going to encourage development. So we could refuse that because it's overdevelopment and creating something that we really don't want to be there, and it really making it worse, the development that's there. So, and then it could be perhaps reapplied for with less hard standing. But
pass those officers.
Again, we are considering the application before us. I hear your concerns, Councillor Frascona. But you can't refuse planning permission because you would prefer something different. You would need to be able to identify what the harm was from that area of hard standing, bearing in mind that we're in tilted balance and it's a high bar you've got to be able to get over with the harm. Also bearing in mind the site is already quite well screened, and we're looking to provide additional landscaping within the site to provide even more screening, you know, I would question where you would see it from, for there to be a level of harm that was so high that the harm outweighed the tilted balance arguments.
I would have thought that the very fact that you're creating a hard standing on a natural surface, which is much more than is needed for 2 caravans and 2 cars, suggests that it's really it's damaging the environment, and it's doing something which is not necessary for this the objective of creating a gypsy and traveller site.
I think I'm happy to be corrected that this site is permeable, isn't it? Hard standing? Yeah. Anything you want to come back on that? I think there really is. No, that's fine. Any other questions, queries or comments? Councillor Thorpe-Apps.
Thank you. Councillor Large asked about which aspects of MPPF this application doesn't meet. Paragraph 111 to 112 talks about sustainable transport options. Accessible locations, developments should be located to reduce the need of travel and offer diverse transport choices. Prioritisation of walking, cycling and public transport take precedence over private cars. This application wouldn't seem to hit that criteria. And paragraph 114, safe and suitable access. Developments must ensure safe access for all users. Again, I think it's quite debatable whether this site would meet that criteria. Do officers agree that sustainability benefit is limited rather than significant? Again, as I said, I think paragraph 6.29 does hint at this, where you say it only carries some sustainability credentials. My reading of what we've been talking about in terms of tilted balance is that the sustainability aspect is fundamental. If we don't have a sustainable site, or if we have a site that is only has weak sustainability credentials, then the application should be refused. It's also clear, as I said before, there's a multitude of local plan and neighbourhood plan policies which this site conflicts with. And if we feel as a committee that the harm of what will be a permanent development, if we feel that that outweighs the benefits of a site that has limited sustainability, would the logical conclusion not be to refuse the application in that situation? Thank you.
I'll pass that back over to you. I'm not sure if there's anything that you haven't covered before.
I don't think there's anything much that we've not said already, and I understand Councillor Thorpe-Apps' concern, but you know the screen there, I think to me says that is an acceptable and sustainable location for any family to live, whether that's a gypsy and traveller site or if it was a proposal for a house. You can get into the village by walking, you can get into the village on your bicycle, whether you choose to do so or not. There is a bus route along Lodge Road. I haven't looked into how frequent that bus goes, but there are bus stops along Lodge Road. It's in a sustainable location.
Thank you. I think that rounds up our comments. So I move that application 25/01025/full lands north of Highwood Road, roundabout Whittle, Chelmsford, Essex, be approved subject to the conditions detailed on pages 16 to 21 of the agenda pack and the slight amendment on the green sheet. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Large. Will all those in favour of approving this application please raise your hand? You're making note numbers. Thank you. Will all those not in favour of approving this application raise your hand? Thank you. Any abstentions? No abstentions. Okay, so this application has been approved. Thank you. Before we move on to the next agenda item, if anyone would like to leave, you are welcome to do so. I'll pause for a minute. Thank you. Right, moving on to agenda items 7 and 8. Now, the presentation will be in one go for this, but we'll have 2 separate votes. So, agenda item 7 and 8, 25/01195/Phil and 28/01194/Phil, field at Greenacre Lane, Stock, Ingatstone, Essex. Note there is a green sheet to this one, which is quite an alteration. We will not be making a formal decision. We'll be sort of almost making our views heard. Over to the officers for their reports. Thank you.
Good evening, members. As you've already been told, the presentation covers 2 applications for 2 storage barns. The site is within a kilometre of Stock, as you can see. Small Gaines Lane is to the west of the site, and to the south is Greenacre Lane, which is a bridle way. It's located within the green belt and is a hub of a larger agricultural holding, and buildings for agriculture are not considered inappropriate in the green belt, and therefore the principle of this development is acceptable. This is the existing site plan. I'm sorry if it's a little bit faint. To the west is the existing access, and that stays the same. There's a track running to an existing hard standing with 4 barns on the hard standing. The proposal is for 2 barns next to each other. They're not for livestock, they're for storage. One's for an agricultural storage barn, which would store equipment and plant, and one is for hay and or feed. They'd be sited next to each other and along the Greenacre Lane boundary. The design of the barns is similar to those existing on the site. The walls are vertical timber on concrete panels, and the roof is Ethernet profile. They're typical materials and design for agricultural buildings, and this design is an open-fronted design, and that's the agricultural storage barn. And this is the hay and feed barn, which is fully enclosed. This is a picture of the site taken in January from the access gate towards the existing barns. These are the existing barns and the hard standing. This was taken in the summer in August. And this was taken in January, showing that hay and bedding have been stored outside. And there's more hay stored around the site. Now, the key issues are the effect on the character and appearance of the area, neighbouring amenity, highway safety, and other matters that have been raised. This photo shows a view of the access taken in winter, and as you can see, there's dense mature vegetation bounding the site. The views are restricted through the vegetation and from the access, but when seen, the views are of a typical agricultural building in a rural setting. That's what you would see. Therefore, the development wouldn't harm the character and appearance of the area. The red dots on this plan show the surrounding residential dwellings. The closest one is about 100 metres away to the south, and it's within the nursery on the opposite side of Greenacre Lane. The storage use would not be harmful to neighbouring amenity in terms of noise, odour and health impact, and Public Health and Protection Services raised no objection to this development. This is the approach down towards the site along Small Gaines Lane, and this is a photo of the access to the site with Greenacres Lane to the right. In terms of highways impacts, there's already an active agricultural use, and it's located in the countryside. Agricultural sites are often served by narrow lanes. The barns are also for storage only. They're unlikely to increase vehicle movements and may even reduce them due to the fact that feed and equipment is stored on the site for the livestock that's already there. There's been no concerns in regard to highway safety. However, concerns have been raised regarding damage to the highway, potholes and damage to verges. And these really are concerns that need to be reported to the Highway Authority, and then they may be able to deal with it. So therefore, in terms of ecology, impacts, the construction is already on existing hard standing, so there will be no loss of existing habitat. And similarly, there's no increase in surface water runoff. The proposals comply with all the relevant policies of the development plan and the MPPF, and they are recommended for approval subject to the conditions provided in the report.
Thank you. Now, we have a couple of members of the public that I believe would like to speak on this application. Can I invite Mr. Millansey first? Thank you. It's an unusual spelling.
Yes, you won't be the first to get
I apologise. Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that I was going to be actually speaking because I'd submitted my questions and I was told that they had been put to the councillors. So
you don't have to read it out. We have all received a copy.
Yeah, no, that's fine then.
Thank you. And a Mr. Tissington? Thank you. I have 2 minutes, starting from now-ish.
Good evening, Chair and councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of over 40 local residents, many of whom have submitted comments and objections regarding these planning applications. The 2 proposed barns represent an expansion to the existing operations that have caused considerable concern for us over the last few years. Whilst we welcome the strict condition of no livestock within the proposed barns, we still remain extremely concerned about the disruption to our daily lives caused by the noise levels, the smells, the farm traffic, and the consequent damage to our narrow country lane, the verges and the hedgerows. If the 2 new barns are to be used to support the wider business as stated by the applicant, then traffic and disruption will not be reduced, and our lives will continue to be adversely impacted to an even greater extent. Many of us have lived here for a long time, and we respect the countryside and our strong village community. We do not want to see it destroyed by this overdevelopment. We trust you understand our position and ask you to please reject these planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If officers want to come back on anything there, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The barns are for hay feed, fodder storage, and by their very nature, associated traffic comings and goings will be limited. And consolidated on-site storage, we believe, should certainly not add the requirement for multi-vehicle trips to and from the site. An agricultural use by its very nature requires a rural location, and such sites are quite often accessed from narrow country lanes. The Highway Authority has confirmed that the proposed development will be safe in terms of its effect on highway safety. The lanes are already used by agricultural vehicles and other vehicles associated with commercial uses in the vicinity. The highways officers undertake site visits where necessary, and a visit has taken place in connection with this planning application. And the Highway Authority are very familiar with Small Gaines Lane from other applications that have been submitted in the vicinity over the years. Responsibility for the maintenance of Small Gaines Lane is with the Highway Authority. And as Vicky said during the presentation, if there are issues with potholes or damage to verges, then these should be reported directly to the Highway Authority. I don't think I've got anything else to add at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 ward councillors with us this evening to give their representations. We'll go alphabetically and ladies first with Councillor Bonnet. Thank you.
Is this working? Yes. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. You have heard from some of the residents and you've read all their reports and questions. I just wanted to hone in on one point really, and that is in relation to the access via Small Games Lane. As acknowledged by the Planning Officer's executive summary at point 2.1, access is via quite narrow country lanes, as you have seen up there. These are single track, rural lanes with no footpaths. For as long as I can remember, they've not only been used by vehicles, but by walkers, cyclists, joggers, horse riders, and I've been all of those over the years. These activities increased significantly during COVID, and they have remained high ever since. Residents have consistently expressed concern about increased vehicle movements associated with these applications. The executive summary at point 1.9 states that the traffic levels associated with the barns and agricultural operations are likely to be reduced, as the on-site storage of hay, forage and related materials would mean fewer daily trips. But likewise, the applicant's supporting statement at point 6.7 says the new buildings are intended to reduce vehicle movements between sites, improve food storage and enhance operational efficiency. The key word, or words, in these statements is likely and intended. There is no guarantee that vehicle movements will in fact reduce. We are being asked to assume that this will be the outcome if these applications are approved, and only time will tell if this will be the case. One area where the increase in traffic is certain is during the construction phase. Planning consideration point 6.37 acknowledges that large vehicles will be required to deliver materials, although it will be short-lived, given that the base is already in situ and construction is above ground. Nevertheless, it cannot be denied that there will inevitably be an increase in large, heavy vehicle movements along these narrow lanes if the applications are approved. Given their restricted width, lack of footways, and regular use by walkers, runners, horse riders, and bike riders, it does raise a legitimate concern about safety and potential damage to the verges, road surfaces, and the hedgerows. So with that in mind, if the committee is minded to approve these applications, I would really respectfully ask that an additional condition be imposed that requires any damage to the verges, road surfaces, or hedgerows resulting from construction traffic be properly repaired and reinstated at the applicant's expense. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to officers, Councillor Whitehead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm not going to double up and say exactly the same thing, as you'll appreciate, really. Can I, first of all, thank the officers, because there's been a lot of work on this application. I mean, it started off actually to store cattle in one of the two barns, and that would have had, in our view, a substantial effect on the residents, because there's a different ruling, isn't there, for 400 metres as opposed to 100 metres. And so a lot of time has been spent, which is why this so-called delay and the appeal that's appeared from it has taken place, because I'm aware that you have all been in touch with the applicants who've, to be kind, have been tardy in their responses, let me put it that way. And I think it's only fair that you know, the residents have been in a sort of state of limbo for quite a while now. The report as such covers the major points about it being agriculture in that area, really. And as Councillor Bonnet says, we can't challenge that. We're back to the local plan story of the previous argument, if you like, really. If the rules are such that it is approved under an agricultural rule, then so be it. But it is a very difficult area. I use the nursery a lot, I have to say, really, which is right next to it, really, so I should declare an interest that I buy my garden plants from there. But it is a terrible road, and I think the most important thing, really, is if we can get agreement with the applicant that it is improved. The other point that has been made, which is not directly covered here, is that there have been problems in the past, really, with smells and not getting rid of all sorts of leftover materials from the cows, let me put it that way, that have not always been resolved. And again, I know officers and enforcement in particular have been trying to sort this one out, really. And it's the combination of the two that I think our residents are concerned about, really. They're saying, well, here's some more, but hang on a minute, the last lot wasn't terribly good either, and it's a problem. So I'm conscious that enforcement is not exactly underworked at the moment, really, to say the least, and therefore such enforcement can't be tied to this. The residents' questions have suggested, you attach one to the other. We can't do that. I accept that that's the case, really. But I think the additional condition that was mentioned by Councillor Bonnet should be there. One would like to make sure that whatever is finally put there is properly policed, if that's the right word, really, and perhaps a time limit set for the actual works to be completed and inspected subsequently. So, sadly, I think that we have to rely upon the applicant's goodwill, and let us hope that he puts some forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Anything officers would like to come back on those points? Thank you.
The point on any damage that occurs during the construction period, that would be a matter for the Highway Authority, and that should be reported to the Highway Authority for action. Absolutely no question that during the construction period there will be an increase in vehicular traffic. Whether there is overall a reduction in vehicular traffic or not, as has been said, time will tell. But the point is that a consolidation of storage and hay, feedstuff and such like on the site is likely, we feel, to result in a reduction in overall vehicle trips. I think the point for us not to lose sight of here is this is a storage barn and a hay barn. It's not the barns are not proposed for use for accommodating livestock, so additional smells, etc., should not occur. If there are issues with particularly bad smells, then that should be reported to environmental health. But it is a rural location, and agriculture is an appropriate use in a rural location, and there will be some effects felt from that. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. And I think with regards to enforcement, then that is obviously dealt with separately. The application that isn't to plan at the moment, but also when this is built, then it's passed on to you guys.
Yes, Chair.
as has been said, whether or not the existing barns have been built in accordance with the planning permission is an entirely separate matter, and we, as an enforcement service, will investigate that and come to any conclusions. We are, of course, a reactive service, so should planning permission be granted and should any residents notice that development is not occurring in accordance with the terms of their planning permission, then in the normal way they can make a report to us and we will investigate.
Thank you. I will pass this over to the committee. Any questions, comments or queries? Councillor Vascona.
One of the barns is to be used to store equipment, and the implication is that it's equipment to be used in, not just in this site but other sites. So surely if the equipment has to be moved from this site backwards and forwards to other sites, it will actually increase traffic. Is that correct?
Thank you. The precise use of the agricultural storage barn is not specifically for equipment. It can also be used for hay and fodder storage. I mean, logic suggests that the barn would be used for, or the barns would be used for storage in connection with this particular hub in Greenacre Lane, rather than the other two farms, the main two farms associated with the holding, which are both on the other side of stock. So we don't know exactly the numbers of vehicles or vehicular movements that will be generated, but given the nature of two barns for storage within a holding, an agricultural holding, we do feel that vehicle movements are going to be modest.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this one? Councillor Armstrong.
Obviously, it's disappointing that it's gone non-determination and appeal. Obviously, it'd be much nicer if it wasn't to that point. With the applications, with them being two, and there obviously been this sort of negotiation period, obviously we're viewing them and discussing them as one, and it's because in nature, and we had another example of this previously in the last year, that really it is one application and they've split probably on very good planning advice so that they're reviewed separately, which puts them under de minimis, which means we're not reviewing the sustainability of the drainage of the site. There's no drainage drawings on this plans. Have we considered requesting an outline of the drainage sort of scheme for this site, or putting a condition on the drainage of this scheme? I know they don't have to on a scheme this size, but have we considered that as a factor in this application as a start point? Thanks.
I'll leave it over to the officers, but I think the barns will be going on current hard standing, so I'm not sure there'll be a change in the hard standing.
That is correct. The barns are proposed to be sited on an existing hard standing, so additional water runoff should not occur. Our understanding is that the drainage at the site is a soakaways and then draining from there when they're, on occasions when they're full, into a nearby ditch.
On drainage modelling, there is a difference between flow rates from roofs, from flow rates from yards. They can often be considerably greater from a roof, and therefore the capacity of the soakaway normally in engineering principles would be reconsidered if you were to put a roof over hard standing. And it's obviously hasn't been, but I appreciate the principle. So.
Anything? Yes, Councillor Thorpe-Apps.
Thank you. Given there are 4 barns nearby on the site already, could we conclude that the steady expansion of the built form of the site represents incremental development, which taken together could be a material alteration of the character of the countryside? Thank you.
We're considering tonight the 2 barns that are proposed as part of this development. So we don't believe they would appear visually prominent or cause undue harm to the appearance of the green belt. The site is well screened. It's got a backdrop of existing trees. In terms of the existing barns, taken together with the 2 proposed barns, they are sited in one part of the field, the southeast corner of the field, it seems most appropriate grouping, a way to group those buildings rather than to spread them across the field where there'll be greater visual prominence. So I think we would be content if this application was coming in with a regularising application for the other 4 barns. We would be content, I believe, with their siting, given the nature of the use that they are for agricultural buildings on an existing holding in the countryside.
Anything else from anybody? No? Okay. I move that if the council had been able to determine the application 25/01195/Phil, field at Greenacre Lane, Stock, Ingatstone, Essex, that it would have been approved, subject to the conditions detailed on pages 59 and 60 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Will all those in favour of approving the application please raise their hands?
Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Highland?
Chair, sorry, I was just going to point of order. I mean, do we need to carry a vote? It's not going to be carried forward anyway. Is there any necessity for a vote in this instance?
As an appeal has been submitted, we're required to tell the planning inspectorate which way we would have determined the application. So the planning inspectorate we need to know the council's position. So we need to know whether we are essentially defending an appeal or not. Yeah, so we do need to vote.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So, yes, will all those in favour of approving the application please raise their hand? Thank you. Will all those not in favour of approving the application please raise your hand? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that would have been approved. The second application, I move that if the council had been able to determine application 25/01194/Phil, field at Greenacre Lane, Stock, Ingatstone, Essex, that it would have been approved, subject to the conditions detailed on pages 50, 65 and 66 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Will all those in favour of approving the application please raise their hand? Thank you. Will all those not in favour of approving the application please raise their hand? And will all those abstaining please raise their hand? Thank you. So that application would have been approved had we been able to. Agenda item 9, planning appeals. You'll see in the agenda pack there is quite a substantial list of appeals. I would like it noted that one of the ones on there was the Chelmsford Village, the Fox and Ravens sites, and I would like it publicly noted that the committee gives thanks to the officers for the considerable amount of work and time that was put into supporting the committee's decision, and as we're well aware, the planning inspector agreed with the committee on that one. Thank you. Meeting closed at 8:45. Thank you very much.